General site issues. Introduction to the module. The construction industry covers a wide range of activities ranging from large-scale civil engineering projects to very small house extensions. This module covers general hazards and control issues that occur in construction safety. Topics to be covered. Introduction. Safe workplace. General hazards and controls. Protection against falls. Protection against falling objects. Vehicles and traffic routes. Noise. Site controls. Site planning. Site security. Provision of welfare facilities. Introduction. Over many years, the construction industry has had a poor health and safety record. In 1966, there were 292 fatalities in the industry, and by 1995 this figure had reduced to 62, but by 2001 the figure had increased to 106. Over the last 25 years, 2,800 people have died on construction sites. These figures include deaths of members of the public, including children playing on construction sites. Although most of these fatalities, over 70%, were caused by falls from height, there are other significant causes. The HSE has listed the main causes of fatalities as falling through fragile roofs and roof lights, falling from ladders, scaffolds and other workplaces, being struck by excavators, forklift trucks or dumper trucks, overturning vehicles, being crushed by collapsing structures. Safe workplace. Safe entrance to and exit from the site, as well as specific work areas on the site, are essential to better health and a safe environment. This clearly requires the safe use of ladders, scaffolds, gangways, stairways, and passenger hoists. It further requires that all excavations are fenced, the site is tidy and proper arrangements are in place to store materials and disposal of waste. When the site is not in use, it must be well lighted and protected against intruders, particularly minors. Such security will include secure and locked gates with proper notices displayed, a sturdy, intact perimeter fence with proper signage, all ladders either stored securely or boarded across their rungs, all mobile plant immobilized and fuel removed, secure storage of all inflammable and dangerous substances, a program of visits to local schools to explain the dangers present on a construction site. This has been shown to reduce the number of child trespassers. Security patrols and closed-circuit television may need to be considered if unauthorized entry persists. General hazards and controls. The Construction, Health, Safety and Welfare Regulations 1996 deal with the main hazards likely to be found on a construction site. The hazards and controls identified in the construction regulations are as follows. Protection against falls. Falls from height are the most common cause of serious injury or death in the construction industry. These falls are normally from a height but may also be on the same level. It is important that trip hazards, such as building and waste materials, are not left on site walkways or roadways. Protection against falling objects. Construction workers and members of the public need to be protected from the hazards associated with falling objects. Both groups should be protected by the use of covered walkways or suitable netting to catch falling debris. Waste material should be brought to ground level by the use of chutes or hoists. Waste should not be thrown from scaffolding, and only minimal quantities of building materials should be stored on working platforms. The Construction, Head Protection, Regulations virtually mandates employers to supply head protection, hard hats, to employees whenever there is a risk of head injury from falling objects. The employer is also responsible for ensuring that hard hats are properly maintained and replaced when they are damaged in any way. Self-employed workers must supply and maintain their own head protection. Employees must wear head protection when so directed, take good care of it and report any loss or defect. Visitors to construction sites should always be supplied with head protection, and mandatory head protection signs should be displayed around the site. Injuries due to falling materials are not limited to materials falling from height. Many fatalities have been caused by the collapse of walls, particularly retaining walls, and by the collapse of excavations. Vehicles and traffic routes. All vehicles used on site should be maintained on a regular basis and records should be kept. Only trained drivers should be permitted to operate cars, and the training should be vehicle-specific. Vehicles should have reversing warning systems installed. HSE investigations have shown that in over 30% of dumper truck accidents, the drivers had little experience and no training. Common forms of accident include driving into excavations, overturning whilst driving up steep inclines, and runaway vehicles which have been left unattended with the engine running. Many vehicles such as mobile cranes should be inspected on a regular basis and have test certificates. Traffic routes and loading and storage spaces must be adequately constructed, with enforced speed limits, sufficient visibility, and vehicle and pedestrian separation in mind. The use of one-way systems and separate site access gates for vehicles and pedestrians may be required. Finally, the safety of members of the public must be considered, particularly where vehicles cross public footpaths. Noise. Noisy machinery should be fitted with silencers. When machinery is used in a workshop, such as woodworking machines, a noise survey should be undertaken. If the noise levels exceed the second action level, the use of ear defenders becomes mandatory. Site controls. Site planning. An essential element of site planning is the layout of the site. Due to a lack of forethought or planning, many sites rapidly degenerate into a muddled or confused state. This leads to a corresponding reduction in health and safety standards and an increase in accidents. During the site planning stage, arrangements will be needed to ensure safe access to and around the site for pedestrians and vehicles. Care must be taken during the planning of traffic routes so that pedestrians and vehicles are kept apart as much as possible. It will also be necessary to provide suitable loading and unloading areas, which may need to be moved as the construction work progresses, and recognized parking areas. Adequate lighting must be provided in all parts of the site, especially along vehicle routes, although natural light should be made available whenever possible. When lighting failure could lead to severe risks of accidents, such as working on a tower scaffold, secondary lighting should be provided, perhaps in the form of torches. Suitable signs will be required on the site. There may be health and safety, warning or directional signs. Emergency arrangements need to be in place before work begins. These arrangements should deal with fire precautions, accident reporting and investigation, and the provision of an accident book together with RIDDOR reporting forms. Whatever the type of construction project, the disposal of any waste produced must be planned. There are 4 requirements for the transfer of waste from the site to final treatment or disposal. 1. Firstly, the waste must be clearly identified. This will involve the determination of the chemical and physical properties of the material, the identification of any special problems associated with the waste, and that it is properly labeled with a written description. 2. Secondly, the waste must be securely stored with procedures to deal with spillages and prevent access, particularly by scavengers or children. 3. The third requirement is that the waste must be transferred only to an authorized person. Classes of an authorized person include registered waste carriers, holders of waste management licenses, or exempt parties such as charities or waste collection authorities. Waste transfer notes must be transferred from one duty holder to the next along the waste chain. Checks are advised to ensure that prospective waste contractors are competent to deal with waste. 4. The final requirement is that adequate records of waste consignments must be kept for at least 2 years in the case of controlled waste and 3 years for any hazardous waste. Site security. Site security is required to ensure that construction materials, equipment and accessories are protected, and this is usually achieved by the erection of a strong perimeter fence and a lockable gate. However, it is also important to protect members of the public, including trespass by children. This is particularly relevant for a refurbishment project when strong hoardings or secure fencing must be provided. There is also a need to ensure that the site itself is safe should children manage to trespass onto the site. This involves the removal of access ladders, providing trench supports, covering holes where possible, immobilizing plants, safe stacking of materials, locking away dangerous chemicals, isolating electrical supplies, locking off fuel storage tanks. Many of these problems may be avoided by visiting local schools to inform children of construction site dangers. Accidents to children on construction sites are a national concern and a widespread problem everywhere. Provision of welfare facilities. The Health and Safety Executive have been concerned for some time about the poor standard of welfare facilities on many construction sites. Welfare arrangements include the provision of sanitary conveniences and washing facilities, drinking water, accommodation for clothing, facilities for changing clothing and facilities for rest and eating meals. Sanitary and washing facilities, including showers if necessary, with an adequate supply of drinking water should be provided for everybody working on the site. Accommodation will be required for the changing and storage of clothes and rest facilities for break times. There should be adequate first aid provision and protective clothing against adverse weather conditions. Welfare issues are covered by the Construction, Health, Safety and Welfare Regulations 1996. There should be adequate protection from the weather, and only as a last resort should public conveniences be used. A good supply of warm water, soap and towels must be provided as close to the sanitary facilities as possible. Hand dryers are permitted, but there are concerns about their effectiveness in drying hands completely and thus removing all bacteria. In the case of temporary or remote work sites, sufficient chemical closets and sufficient washing water in containers must be provided. Drinking water must be readily accessible to the entire workforce. The supply of drinking water must be adequate and wholesome. Normally mains water is used and should be marked as drinking water if water is not fit for drinking is also available. On some sites, particularly during the early stages of construction, it may be necessary to provide bottled water or water in tanks. Accommodation for clothing and facilities for changing clothing must be provided, clean, warm, dry, well ventilated, and secure. Where workers are required to wear special or protective clothing, arrangements should be such that any hazardous substances do not contaminate the workers' clothing. Facilities for rest and eating meals must be provided so that workers may sit down during break times in areas where they do not need to wear personal protective equipment. It should be possible for workers to make hot drinks and prepare food. Separate rooms should be provided for smokers and non-smokers. Facilities should also be provided for pregnant women and nursing mothers to rest. Arrangements must be in place to ensure that hazardous substances do not contaminate food. Many fires have been caused by placing clothes on an electric heater. Damp clothes should not be positioned in contact with the heater, and there should be adequate ventilation around the heater. If possible, the heater should be fitted with a high-temperature cutout device. Summary. In this module, we have covered safe entrance to and exit from the site, as well as specific work areas on the site, are essential to better health and a safe environment. Falls from height are the most common cause of serious injury or death in the construction industry. Construction workers and members of the public need to be protected from the hazards associated with falling objects. Only trained drivers should be permitted to operate cars, and the training should be vehicle-specific. Site security is required to ensure that construction materials, equipment and accessories are protected, and this is usually achieved by the erection of a strong perimeter fence and a lockable gate. Thank you. This is the end of this module. Thanks for watching. Happy learning.